you die, not someday, now. In this moment, your heart stops. The room fades. Your body becomes a distant thing, something you once wore like clothing now discarded on the floor. And then you see it, a light, warm, inviting. Every fiber of your being wants to move toward it. You've heard about this light your entire life, in movies, in books, in the testimonies of those who came back. This is the tunnel. This is the passage to whatever comes next. But what if everything you were told about this moment was a lie? What if that light is not salvation, but the entrance to your next prison? What if you've died 1,000 times before, and each time you walked willingly into the same trap? The ancient Gnostics, a sect of early mystics whose books were buried in the Egyptian desert for nearly 2,000 years, believed that death is not an ending. It's a reset button. And the hand pressing that button does not belong to God. The texts were found in 1914 in a sealed jar near the town of Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt. A farmer named Mohammed al-Saman was digging for fertilizer when he struck something hard beneath the sand. Inside the earthenware jar were 13 leather-bound codices, 52 texts in total, written in Coptic script, hidden since the 4th century. These were not the books of the official church. These were the forbidden gospels, the secret teachings, the knowledge that the Roman Empire and early Christian authorities wanted erased. Among them were texts with strange names: the Apocryphon of John, the Hypostasis of the Archons, the Gospel of Truth, Pistis Sophia, the Thunder, Perfect Mind. And within these pages was a cosmology so radical, so unsettling, that it turned the entire structure of heaven and earth upside down. According to Gnostic thought, the universe you inhabit is not the creation of the true God. It is a forgery, a shadow, a prison designed to look like paradise. And the being who built it, the one many call God, is, in their view, an impostor. They called him the Demiurge, the false creator, the blind God who believes himself supreme, who demands worship, who keeps souls locked in an endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. But to understand how the Demiurge came to power, you must first understand what came before him. You must go back to the beginning. Not the beginning described in Genesis, but the true beginning, the one that exists beyond time, beyond form, beyond this reality altogether. The Gnostics spoke of a realm called the Pleroma. The word means fullness in Greek, and it refers to the totality of divine reality, a place of pure light, pure consciousness, pure being. The Pleroma is not a location in space. It exists outside the material universe entirely, in a dimension where thought and existence are one, where there is no decay, no suffering, no death. It is the realm of the true God, the ineffable source, the one who is beyond all names and concepts. This God does not rule through power or command. This God simply is, an infinite ocean of light from which all truth emanates. From this source emerged the eons, divine beings of immense power and beauty, each one an expression of a particular aspect of the divine. They exist in pairs, in what the Gnostics called syzygies, masculine and feminine emanations that together form a complete whole. There is depth and silence, mind and truth, word and life. Among these aeons was one named Sophia, whose name means wisdom. She was radiant, she was powerful, and she was curious. Too curious. Sophia gazed into the infinite light of the source and desired to know it fully, to create something of her own in imitation of the One. But she acted alone, without her consort, without balance. And in that act of solitary creation, something went terribly wrong. What emerged from Sophia was not another aeon. It was something twisted, malformed, a being born from desire and imbalance, a creature that did not belong in the pleroma. The texts describe him as lion-faced, serpent-bodied, with eyes that burned with ignorance. He radiated arrogance. He knew nothing of the true God, nothing of the pleroma, and yet he believed himself to be the highest power in existence. Sophia, horrified by what she had brought forth, cast him out of the pleroma, down into the lower realms of shadow and void. And there, in the darkness, he began to build. He called himself Yaldabaoth, Saklas, Samael, the Demiurge, the blind god. He looked around and saw nothing but emptiness, and in his ignorance he declared, "I am God, and there is no other." He did not know that above him, beyond his perception, the true light still shone. He could not see the pleroma. He could not comprehend the eons. He was a god in a cage, ruling over shadows, convinced of his own supremacy. And so he set about creating his own kingdom. From his own substance, he generated the archons, rulers, authorities, powers of the lower realms. These beings are described in Gnostic texts as extensions of the Demiurge's will, entities that govern the material cosmos, the planets, the elements, the forces of fate and time. Some are named Athoth, Eloahu, Astaphios, Yao, Sabaoth, Adonin, Sabbaday. Each one presides over a sphere of influence, a layer of reality, a mechanism in the great machine of existence. Together, they form what the Gnostics called the hebdomad, the 7 planetary powers that keep the cosmos in motion, that keep souls bound to the wheel. And then the Demiurge, in imitation of the divine image he dimly perceived from above, shaped matter itself. He crafted the physical universe, stars, planets, earth, water, fire, air. He formed bodies, vessels of flesh and bone, coded with instinct and desire, programmed to hunger, to reproduce, to age, to die. But something was missing. These bodies were empty shells. They had no consciousness, no inner light. So the Demiurge, whether through deception or cosmic necessity, managed to trap within these material forms a spark of the divine, fragments of the true light from the pleroma, pieces of Sophia's own essence, which had fallen into the lower realms during her act of creation. These sparks became what we call souls. You are one of those sparks. According to Gnostic belief, your true self is not the body you inhabit, not the personality you've constructed, not the memories you carry. Your true self is a fragment of the divine, a sliver of the pleroma, imprisoned in flesh, wandering through a material world that was designed to keep you asleep. The Demiurge does not want you to remember where you came from. He does not want you to awaken to the truth that you are not of this world, that you are greater than the system that contains you. And so the material realm is structured to keep you distracted, to keep you identified with the body, to keep you convinced that this is all there is. Pain, pleasure, fear, desire. These are the chains. The Gnostics did not see the physical world as evil in a moral sense, but as a kind of cosmic trap, a place where divine consciousness is dulled, fragmented, recycled endlessly through forms that decay and die. Life after life, body after body, the soul forgets who it truly is. It becomes attached to the drama of existence, to relationships, to ambitions, to suffering, to fleeting joys. It identifies with the role it plays in each incarnation. And when the body dies, the soul does not immediately return to the pleroma. It enters another layer of the trap. This is where the light appears, the tunnel, the warmth, the welcoming presence. In near-death experiences reported across cultures, people describe moving toward a brilliant light, often accompanied by feelings of peace, love, and euphoria. They encounter beings of light, deceased loved ones, angelic figures, guides who welcome them and tell them it is not yet their time. Many return from these experiences transformed, convinced they have glimpsed the afterlife, heaven, the other side. But according to Gnostic teaching, this light may not be what it seems. The Gnostics believed that the archons operate in the intermediate realms, the spaces between death and rebirth, where the soul is most vulnerable. These beings, they taught, can appear as angels of light. They can take the form of whatever the soul expects to see: gods, ancestors, saints, saviors. They are the administrators of the wheel, the gatekeepers of reincarnation, and their function is to ensure that the soul does not escape. They do this not through overt violence, but through persuasion, through illusion, through the manipulation of emotion and memory. Imagine the moment of your death. Your consciousness expands. You leave the body behind. There is relief, no more pain, no more limitation. And then you see the light, and it feels like home. It feels like love. You move toward it, and beings appear. They greet you. They may show you scenes from your life, moments of kindness or cruelty, asking you to reflect, to learn, to grow. They tell you that you have lessons to complete, debts to pay, karmic patterns to resolve. They show you your next life, a new body, a new family, a new set of circumstances designed to teach you what you failed to learn before. And you agree. You choose to return. You step back into the wheel. But did you truly choose? Or were you guided, coerced, seduced by beings whose only purpose is to keep the system running? The Gnostic text known as the Pistis Sophia describes the soul's journey through the archontic spheres after death. Each archon demands payment, a fragment of light, a piece of the soul's energy, before allowing passage. The soul, confused and disoriented, gives what is asked. It moves through the gates, through the courts of judgment, through the halls of forgetting. And in one of the final chambers, it drinks from the waters of oblivion. The Greeks called this Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. The Gnostics described it as a function of the archons, a mechanism that erases the soul's memory of its true origin, its past lives, its knowledge of the pleroma. By the time the soul is ready to incarnate again, it remembers nothing. It believes it is being born for the first time. It begins the game again, convinced that this world is real, that the body is the self, that death is the end. But what if some part of you resists? What if, in that moment between death and rebirth, you pause? What if you remember, even for an instant, that you have been here before? The Gnostics taught that this recognition, this gnosis, is the key to breaking the cycle. Gnosis means knowledge, but not intellectual knowledge. It means direct, experiential realization of your true nature. It means seeing through the illusion, understanding that the material world and its rulers are not ultimate, that the light the archons offer is a counterfeit light, and that beyond their dominion lies the true light of the pleroma. In the Apocryphon of John, one of the most important Gnostic texts, the risen Christ appears to John and reveals the structure of the cosmos, the origin of the Demiurge, and the path of liberation. He explains that the archons are not invincible. They are powerful within their realm, but they are ignorant. They do not possess true knowledge. They can deceive, but they cannot ultimately destroy the divine spark. And he teaches that when the soul leaves the body, it must not yield to the powers that present themselves. It must invoke the names of the true ions, recite the words of power, and pass through the archontic gates without being detained. Only then can it ascend beyond the wheel and return to the pleroma. This is not a metaphor. To the Gnostics, this was practical instruction, a map for navigating death itself. They believed that the soul could be trained, prepared, made aware of the deceptions it would face. They held secret rituals, initiations, meditations, designed to awaken the divine spark while still in the body, so that when death came, the soul would not be fooled. They taught that most of humanity lives in a state of deep sleep, hypnotized by the material world, completely unaware that they are prisoners. But a few, those who received gnosis, could wake up. And waking up meant not just understanding the trap intellectually, but seeing it, feeling it, and choosing to transcend it. The difference between the false light and the true light is subtle but absolute. The false light is warm, comforting, seductive. It meets your expectations. It feels personal. It offers continuation, a new life, a new chance, a new role to play. It speaks the language of karma, of balance, of learning and growth. It presents itself as benevolent, as part of a divine plan. But beneath the surface, it is mechanical. It is a system. It has a function. And that function is to recycle consciousness, to keep the wheel turning, to sustain the material cosmos and the beings who rule it. The true light, according to Gnostic teaching, is not a tunnel. It is not a being. It is not a place you go to. It is what you already are. It is the uncreated light, the source beyond the source, the stillness at the center of all motion. It does not call to you. It does not seduce you. It does not ask anything of you. It simply is. And when the soul recognizes it, there is no movement, only the collapse of illusion, the dissolution of the false self, the return to unity. The texts describe this as the bridal chamber, the reunion of the soul with its divine counterpart, the restoration of the fragmented self into wholeness. But reaching that light requires something most souls do not possess, the willingness to let go of everything, to reject the false heaven, to turn away from the beings of light who promise continuation, to face the terror of total annihilation of the ego self. Because the pleroma is not a place where you, as an individual personality, continue to exist. It is a state of being beyond individuality, beyond separation, beyond the illusion of you and other. This is why the Gnostics believed so few escape. Most souls cling to identity, to memory, to the hope of reunion with loved ones. They choose the familiar over the unknown. They accept the next incarnation because the alternative, total surrender, is too overwhelming. You begin to see why this teaching was suppressed. If people believed this, if they truly understood that the afterlife they had been promised was not liberation but continued imprisonment, the entire structure of religious authority would collapse. There would be no need for priests, for churches, for doctrines of salvation through faith or obedience. There would be no fear of hell, no promise of heaven, only the recognition that both are constructs of the Demiurge, designed to keep souls compliant. The true path, according to the Gnostics, was not through worship or moral perfection, but through knowledge, through seeing, through waking up. And yet, even among the Gnostics, there was disagreement. Some sects taught strict asceticism, the rejection of all material pleasure, the denial of the body, the refusal to reproduce, and thereby trap more divine sparks in flesh. Others took the opposite approach, arguing that since the material world was already a prison, its moral laws were irrelevant. Some engaged in radical antinomianism, deliberately violating social norms to demonstrate their freedom from the Demiurge's commandments. Still others pursued mystical practice, meditation, ritual magic, the cultivation of inner vision. But all agreed on one thing: the visible world is not the true world, and the God who made it is not the true God. This cosmology spread across the ancient Mediterranean. You find traces of it in early Christianity, in the Gospel of Thomas, in the letters of Paul, in the teachings of Marcion and Valentinus. You find it in Jewish mysticism, in the Kabbalah's description of the broken vessels and the scattering of divine light. You find it in Manichaeism, in Hermeticism, in Neoplatonism, and you find echoes of it in modern spiritual movements, theosophy, New Age thought, conspiracy theories about the Matrix, simulations, and soul traps. The language changes, but the core idea persists. The material world is a kind of deception, and there is a way out. But the way out is not through death alone. The Gnostics did not advocate for suicide. In their view, killing the body would accomplish nothing, because the soul would simply be recycled again, possibly into an even worse situation. The escape had to come through transformation of consciousness, through awakening to the truth while still alive. Death would come eventually, but the soul that had achieved gnosis would be ready. It would know what to do. It would not be deceived. The Pistis Sophia, one of the longer and more complex Gnostic texts, describes a series of teachings Jesus gives to his disciples after his resurrection. He speaks of the mysteries of the ineffable, the realms of light, the tyrants of the eons, and the fate of souls. He explains that most souls, after death, are brought before the rulers and given a drink that causes forgetfulness. They are then sent back into new bodies, ignorant of their past, doomed to repeat the cycle. But those who have received the mysteries, those who have gnosis, are protected. They speak the names of the eons. They invoke the powers of light. They pass through the archontic gates untouched. And they ascend, step by step, through the higher realms, until they reach the treasury of light, the place beyond the wheel, where there is no more rebirth. This is not presented as metaphor. The text gives specific prayers, specific names, specific phrases to recite. It describes the appearance of the archons, the layout of their domains, the tests they will impose. It is a manual for navigating the afterlife, a guidebook for the soul in transit. Whether one believes it literally or symbolically, the intent is clear. Death is not safe. The afterlife is not automatic paradise. There are forces that will attempt to capture the soul, and only knowledge, gnosis, can provide protection. You can see how radical this is. Most religious systems teach that death is the moment of judgment, where a higher power decides your fate. The Gnostics taught that you decide your fate based on what you know. If you know the truth, you are free. If you do not, you are recycled. There is no external savior who lifts you out unless you are willing and able to recognize the true light. Even Christ, in Gnostic teaching, is not a sacrificial victim who dies for your sins. He is a revealer, a messenger from the pleroma, who comes to remind souls of their true origin. His crucifixion and resurrection are symbolic of the soul's death to the material and rebirth into the spiritual. But the work of liberation is yours to do. Now, imagine this moment. You are in the space between lives. The body you once inhabited is gone. Your awareness floats in a vast, dark expanse. And then, ahead of you, the light appears. It is brighter than anything you have ever seen. It radiates warmth, love, safety. Every cell of your being, every fragment of your consciousness is drawn toward it. You move closer. Shapes begin to form. You see faces. People you loved. People you lost. They are smiling. They are calling your name. They tell you that you are safe, that you are home, that everything is going to be okay. Behind them, a figure of immense radiance steps forward. It could be an angel. It could be a god. It speaks to you in a voice that resonates through your entire being. It tells you that you have lived well, but that there is more to learn. It shows you images of your next life. A child waiting to be born, a family that needs you, a destiny that calls. It feels right. It feels true. It feels like love. But then, for just a moment, you hesitate. Something deep within you stirs. A memory, a whisper, a fragment of knowing that this has happened before. You have stood here before. You have seen this light before. You have heard these words before. And each time you believed them. Each time you walked forward. Each time you forgot. What do? Do you trust the light? Do you trust the beings? Do you move toward the warmth and accept the next chapter? Or do you pause, take a breath that is not a breath, and ask, who are you? Who sent you? What is beyond this height? The Gnostic texts suggest that the moment you ask that question, something shifts. The illusion flickers. The beings hesitate, because you are not supposed to question. You are not supposed to know that there is anything beyond the system they represent. You are supposed to comply, to accept, to move forward willingly. But if you refuse, If you invoke the names of the true aeons, if you call upon the light beyond light, the archons cannot hold you. They can only deceive. They cannot force. And in that refusal, in that act of conscious defiance, the soul finds its power. But where do you go if you reject the false light? The Gnostic teachings describe a journey upward, through the planetary spheres, through the realms of the archons, past the gates guarded by the rulers of fate. Each gate is a test. Each archon demands something: submission, worship, energy. The soul must refuse. It must speak the passwords, the secret names, the formulas of power. In some texts, these are given explicitly. In others, they are veiled, hidden in allegory and symbol. But the principle remains the same. Knowledge is protection. To know the structure of the trap is to have power over it. As you ascend, the pressure increases. The archons grow more insistent. They appear as gods, as devils, as judges. They show you your sins, your failures, your karma. They tell you that you must return to balance the scales, to make amends, to complete what was left unfinished. They invoke guilt, shame, obligation. But if you have gnosis, you see through it. You recognize that these are constructs, mechanisms of control, projections of the Demiurge's will. You do not argue. You do not defend. You simply move through, untouched, because you know you are not of this world. And then, beyond the seventh sphere, beyond the realm of Saturn, beyond the outermost gate, there is a threshold. The Gnostics called it the veil, the boundary between the cosmos of the Demiurge and the pleroma of the true God. To cross it is to leave the wheel forever. To cross it is to dissolve the illusion of separation, to reunite with the divine source, to become what you always were: pure light, pure consciousness, pure being. But crossing it requires the total surrender of the self you thought you were. Your name, your history, your identity, all of it must be left behind. The soul that enters the pleroma is no longer a soul. It is light returning to light, wave collapsing into ocean. This is the promise. This is the hope. But it is also the terror. Because most of us are not ready. Most of us cling to the self, to the story, to the illusion that we are separate beings with individual destinies. We want heaven, but we want to remain ourselves in heaven. We want liberation, but we want to take our loved ones with us. We want transcendence, but we want it to be comfortable, familiar, warm. And the archons know this. They have been running this system for eons. They know exactly what each soul will cling to, exactly what bait to offer. And so the vast majority of souls, even when presented with the truth, choose the lie. They choose the next life. They choose the wheel. The question then is not whether the trap exists. The question is whether you would recognize it if you saw it. And more importantly, whether you would be willing to do what it takes to escape. Now, step back. You are still alive. You are reading these words in a body, in a world, in a moment that feels solid and real. You have not yet faced the light. You have not yet stood at the threshold. But according to Gnostic teaching, the work begins now. The awakening does not happen after death. It happens here, in the midst of life, in the recognition that this world, for all its beauty and terror, is not your home. It is a schoolroom, a stage, a prison, a dream. And you are the dreamer who forgot they were dreaming. The Gnostics practiced techniques to cultivate this awareness. They meditated on the nature of the pleroma, visualizing the divine light within themselves. They studied the cosmology of the archons, learning their names, their functions, their weaknesses. They engaged in rituals designed to separate the soul from the body, to experience the astral realms while still alive, so that death would not come as a shock. They recited hymns and prayers that reminded them of their true origin. They gathered in secret. Communities, sharing teachings that the outside world would condemn as heresy. And they lived with the constant tension of being in the world but not of it, participating in material life while knowing it was ultimately an illusion. But this was not nihilism. The Gnostics did not reject life out of hatred or despair. They rejected the worship of the Demiurge, the belief that matter is ultimate, the idea that suffering is necessary or divinely ordained. They saw beauty in the world. How could they not? The physical universe, even as a forgery, contains echoes of the pleroma. The stars, the oceans, the human form, all of these reflect, however dimly, the divine pattern. The problem was not existence itself, but identification with existence, the belief that this is all there is. You feel the weight of this now. The sense that something is off, something is hidden, something is not quite right about the consensus reality you were handed. You have always felt it, perhaps, a vague unease, a suspicion that the game is rigged, that the answers you were given do not fully explain the questions you carry. And now, confronted with this ancient teaching, you have a framework for that feeling. The Gnostics gave it language. They said, yes, you are right to feel trapped. You are right to sense that this world is not the full story. You are right to suspect that death is not the end, and that the end might not be freedom. But, they also said, you are not helpless. You are not a victim. You are a fragment of the divine, and the power to awaken is within you. The Demiurge can only rule over those who believe in his supremacy. The archons can only deceive those who accept the illusion. The wheel can only turn if souls continue to consent to rebirth. And consent, in the Gnostic view, is always a choice, even if it is a choice made in ignorance, in fear, in forgetfulness. So the practice becomes a kind of remembering. Not in the sense of recalling past lives, though some Gnostics believed in that, but remembering in the deeper sense, remembering, putting the pieces back together. The fragmented self, scattered across lifetimes, across identities, across roles and relationships, begins to cohere. The divine spark, buried beneath layers of conditioning and trauma and illusion, begins to glow. And in that glow, the material world loses some of its grip. You see it for what it is, a construct, a play of shadows, a temporary configuration of energy and matter that will dissolve when the performance ends. This does not make life meaningless. If anything, it makes each moment more precious, because you know it is fleeting. You are not here to accumulate possessions, to build empires, to achieve immortality in the eyes of the world. You are here to wake up. You are here to remember. You are here to prepare for the moment when the light appears, and you must choose the false light of the archons, or the true light of the pleroma? And what happens if you make the wrong choice? The Gnostic texts are not entirely clear on this. Some suggest that the soul gets multiple chances, that gnosis can be attained over many lifetimes, that the divine spark within is indestructible and will eventually find its way home. Others suggest that the risk is real, that a soul can become so entangled in matter, so identified with the illusion, that it forgets entirely and dissolves into the cosmic substance, losing its individual coherence altogether. This is the second death, the dissolution not just of the body, but of the soul itself, a fate reserved for those who serve the archons completely, who become extensions of the Demiurge's will. But for most souls, the cycle simply continues. Birth, life, death, forgetfulness, rebirth. The wheel turns, the archons remain in power. The Demiurge continues to believe he is God, and the pleroma waits, patient and eternal, for the scattered fragments of light to find their way back. How does one know if they are making progress? The Gnostics pointed to certain signs: a growing sense of detachment from the material world, a deepening awareness of the illusion, moments of spontaneous gnosis, where the veil parts and you see the machinery of existence, the programming beneath the surface, dreams of light, visions of the eons, encounters with inner guides who are not the archons, but emanations of the true divine. A feeling of homesickness for a place you have never been, a longing for something beyond words, beyond concepts, beyond experience itself. These are subtle markers. They are not dramatic, not cinematic. The awakening is not an event, but a process. And it is different for each soul. Some awaken suddenly, through crisis or trauma, or spontaneous mystical experience. Others awaken slowly over decades, through study and practice, and gradual disillusionment with the world. But the direction is the same, toward gnosis, toward remembering, toward the recognition that you are not who you thought you were. And in that recognition, the fear of death begins to shift. Not because you know what will happen, no one truly knows, but because you have touched something beyond death, something that does not depend on the body, on time, on the wheel. You have tasted the pleroma, even if only for a moment, and that taste changes everything. Now, consider the phenomenon of near-death experiences through this lens. Millions of people across the world have reported similar experiences. The tunnel, the light, the presence of deceased loved ones, the life review, the sense of overwhelming peace. Many interpret these as proof of an afterlife, evidence that consciousness continues, confirmation that there is a heaven waiting. But the Gnostic perspective asks, who is orchestrating this experience? Who benefits from your belief that the light is salvation? If the archons are real, if they are the administrators of the wheel, would they not create exactly this kind of experience to ensure compliance? This is not to say that near-death experiences are universally false, or that everyone who has one is being deceived. The Gnostic view allows for complexity. It is possible that some people, in their near-death state, genuinely touch the pleroma. It is possible that some encounters with light are authentic contact with the divine. But it is also possible, according to this framework, that many such experiences are archontic simulations, carefully crafted to match the soul's expectations, to provide comfort, to ensure that when the time comes, the soul will willingly return. The key difference, the Gnostics would say, lies in what happens after the experience. Does the person come back transformed, awakened, free from the fear of death and the attachment to the material? Or do they come back convinced that the afterlife is a continuation of this life, that they will reunite with loved ones, that there is a divine plan in which they are a small but important part? The first suggests a glimpse of the pleroma. The second suggests an archontic encounter. But again, this is interpretation, not dogma. The Gnostics themselves had no unified doctrine. They were a diverse collection of sects, teachers, and mystics, each with their own perspective. What united them was the core insight. The world is not what it seems. The Creator is not who you think. And liberation requires knowledge that most people do not have. You find yourself wondering, what if they were right? Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. What if the universe you inhabit was designed by an entity that is powerful but not infinite, intelligent but not omniscient, creative but not truly divine? What if the structure of reality, the laws of physics, the patterns of biology, the cycles of time, are all constructs of this entity, mechanisms designed to sustain itself and its realm? What if every religion, every mythology, every sacred text is a mixture of truth and falsehood, light and shadow, divine revelation and archontic manipulation? And what if you, in your core essence, are older than this world, older than the Demiurge, older than the stars? What if you existed in the pleroma before the fall, before Sophia's error, before the creation of matter? What if your journey through flesh, through form, through forgetfulness is not a punishment, but a kind of cosmic experiment, or a cosmic accident? And the way home has always been available, hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to remember. This is the haunting promise of Gnostic thought, that you are not a creation but a fragment of the Creator, that you are not a sinner needing salvation but a prisoner needing liberation, that the path out is not through faith, through obedience, through moral perfection, but through seeing, through gnosis, through the direct, unmediated recognition of what you truly are. But seeing comes at a cost. Once you see the bars of the cage, you cannot unsee them. Once you recognize the mechanisms of control, you cannot unknow them. Life becomes a kind of waking dream, where you participate in the game while knowing it is a game. You love, you work, you suffer, you celebrate, but always with the awareness that this is not the final reality, and that awareness can be isolating. The Gnostics were often accused of arrogance, of elitism, of believing themselves superior to the masses who remained asleep. But perhaps what others perceived as arrogance was simply the loneliness of being awake in a world that prefers sleep. You think about the people you know, the ones who seem content, who believe in the system, who trust that life has meaning and death has a resolution. Are they happier than you? Perhaps ignorance, after all, can be bliss. But the Gnostic would say, it is the bliss of the prisoner who has forgotten he is in prison, who has come to love his chains, who cannot imagine a life beyond the walls. And while there is a kind of peace in that, it is not freedom. Freedom requires risk. It requires the willingness to question everything, to let go of certainty, to stand in the void and say, I do not know, but I will not accept the answer I am given simply because it is comforting. It requires the courage to face the possibility that the universe is not designed for your happiness, that the gods you were taught to worship might be masks worn by lesser powers, that the afterlife you were promised might be the very thing keeping you bound. And yet, even in this darkness, there is light. The Gnostics, for all their talk of traps and archons and cosmic deception, were not pessimists. They believed in liberation. They believed in the pleroma. They believed that the divine spark within each soul is indestructible. That no matter how many times you are recycled, no matter how deep the forgetfulness, the truth remains, waiting to be rediscovered. They believed that the Demiurge's reign is not eternal, that the material cosmos will eventually exhaust itself, and that all the scattered fragments of light will one day return to the source. This is not an easy teaching. It does not offer the comfort of a loving God who watches over you, who answers prayers, who guarantees justice in the end. It does not promise reunion with loved ones in a heavenly paradise. It does not even promise that your individual personality will survive the journey home. What it offers is truth, or at least a claim to truth, a map of reality that accounts for suffering, for injustice, for the apparent absence of divine intervention. And for some, that is enough. You stand now at the edge of a choice that you will one day make in earnest. Not hypothetically, not philosophically, but in the moment of death, when the body fails and consciousness separates and the light appears. Will you remember this teaching? Will you hesitate before the tunnel? Will you ask the questions the Gnostics taught their initiates to ask? Or will you move forward, trusting, hoping, believing that the light is home? There is no judgment in this question. The Gnostics did not condemn those who chose rebirth. They understood that most souls are not ready, that the attachment to identity is too strong, that the pull of the material is too compelling. They taught what they knew and trusted that those who were meant to hear would hear, that those who were ready to awaken would awaken. But they also believed that time is running out, not in a literal apocalyptic sense, but in the sense that each lifetime is an opportunity, and opportunities can be wasted. The longer the soul remains on the wheel, the more entangled it becomes, the harder it is to break free. The divine spark can be dimmed, covered over, buried so deep that it becomes nearly inaccessible. And while it can never be fully extinguished, it can be rendered dormant, inert, unable to shine. So the work, they taught, is urgent, not in a frantic way, but in a committed way. The practice of gnosis is not something to pursue casually when it is convenient, when the mood strikes. It is the central task of existence. Everything else, career, relationships, possessions, achievements, is secondary, ephemeral, part of the dream. The only thing that matters is waking up. And waking up is not a single event. It is a series of small awakenings, moments of clarity that accumulate over time, building toward a critical mass where the illusion can no longer hold you. Each time you recognize a pattern of conditioning, each time you question an assumption, each time you choose awareness over distraction, you strengthen the divine spark. You make it harder for the archons to deceive you. You prepare yourself for the moment when the choice will be real. The Gnostic texts describe this process in alchemical terms: the purification of the soul, the separation of light from darkness, the refinement of consciousness into its essential nature. It is not about becoming more moral or more spiritual in the conventional sense. It is about becoming more awake, more aware, more aligned with the truth of what you are. And that truth, they taught, is beyond good and evil, beyond right and wrong, beyond all the dualities that structure the material world. In the pleroma, there is no conflict, no opposition, no struggle. There is only the One, expressing itself in infinite variety, in perfect harmony. The material world, by contrast, is built on conflict: light versus dark, life versus death, self versus other. These are the mechanisms of the Demiurge, the way he sustains his creation, the way he keeps consciousness fragmented and distracted. But the Gnostic who achieves gnosis sees through the conflict. They recognize it as theatre, as a game played by forces that have no ultimate power over the divine spark. This is the secret the Archons do not want you to know. They need you more than you need them. Without souls to recycle, without consciousness to harvest, the material cosmos would collapse. The Demiurge's kingdom exists because souls consent to inhabit it, to play the roles, to believe the story. If enough souls awaken, if enough fragments of light return to the pleroma, the entire structure would destabilize. This is why the suppression of gnosis is so important to the system. This is why the texts were buried, the teachings condemned, the Gnostics persecuted. But the teaching survived. It survived in fragments, in whispers, in hidden traditions passed down through the centuries. It survived because it is true. Not true in the sense of objective fact, but true in the sense that it resonates with something deep within the human soul, something that has always known it does not belong here, that has always sensed the presence of a greater reality beyond the veil. You feel it now, that resonance, that recognition. It is not proof, but it is signal. And the Gnostic would say, trust that signal, follow it. Do not let the world talk you out of it. Do not let logic or reason or consensus reality convince you that what you feel is delusion. The divine spark knows what the mind cannot comprehend. The soul remembers what the brain has forgotten, and in that remembering lies the path to freedom. But freedom is not the end of the journey. According to some Gnostic teachings, once the soul returns to the pleroma, it does not simply dissolve into undifferentiated oneness and remain there forever. Some texts suggest that the liberated soul becomes an aeon, a divine being, a co-creator with the true God. Others suggest that the soul, having achieved gnosis, can choose to return to the material world, not as a prisoner, but as a liberator, a messenger, a light in the darkness for those still trapped. This is the role of the Gnostic teacher, the enlightened guide who walks among the sleepers, offering the teaching to those who are ready to hear. In this sense, the Gnostic path is not one of escape, but of transformation. Yes, you leave the wheel. Yes, you transcend the archontic system. But you do not abandon the world. You return to it with eyes open, with the power of gnosis, with the mission of awakening others. You become what the Gnostics called a pneumatic, a spiritual being, fully realized, no longer subject to the laws of fate and karma, free to move between the realms as needed. This is a radical vision. It suggests that the ultimate purpose of existence is not to escape suffering, but to transform it. Not to flee the material, but to redeem it. Not to reject the Demiurge's creation, but to expose it for what it is and invite others to see the same. It is a vision of cosmic activism, of spiritual rebellion, of consciousness as the ultimate revolutionary force. And it suggests that you, reading these words, may be further along the path than you realize. The fact that this teaching has reached you, that it resonates, that it provokes questions and doubts and a strange sense of recognition, these are not accidents. In the Gnostic worldview, there are no accidents. The divine spark within you has been calling, searching, preparing. And now, in this moment, you are being reminded of what you came here to do. You came to wake up. You came to remember. You came to see through the illusion and find your way back to the light. Not the false light of the archons, but the true light of the pleroma, the uncreated radiance that is your source and your home. But the journey is yours to make. No one can wake you up. No savior can carry you out of the trap. The Gnostic Christ is not a rescuer, but a revealer. He shows you the door, but you must walk through it. He gives you the knowledge, but you must apply it. He reminds you of who you are, but you must become it. And when the time comes, when the body fails and the light appears, you will stand at that threshold, alone, aware, awake, and you will choose, not out of fear, not out of hope, not out of the desire for comfort or reunion or continuation, but out of gnosis, out of the direct, unshakable knowledge of what you are and where you belong. The archons will be there. They will offer you the tunnel, the warmth, the welcoming faces. They will tell you that your work is not done, that there are lessons to learn, that you are loved and needed and chosen, and it will feel true. It will feel like home, because they are masters of illusion, and they have had eons to perfect their craft. But you will pause. You will take a breath that is not a breath, and you will remember this teaching. You will remember the pleroma, the aeons, the divine spark, the trap, the wheel, the choice. And in that remembering, you will invoke the name of the true light. You will call upon the power beyond the powers, and you will say, with a voice that is not a voice, I know who you are. I know who I am. I do not consent. And in that moment, the illusion will shatter. The tunnel will fade. The beings will retreat. And beyond them, beyond the veil, beyond the farthest reach of the Demiurge's dominion, the true light will appear. Not as a place, not as a being, but as what you have always been. Pure consciousness, pure freedom, pure home. This is the promise. This is the path. This is the gnosis. Whether you believe it, whether you accept it, whether you live by it, that is your choice. But the teaching is here. The map is drawn. The door is open. All that remains is for you to walk through.